A very pleasant good day to our viewers. We welcome you to another edition of Marriage Encounter. We are delighted that you have chosen to tune in to today's program. We are talking about resolving conflicts in marriage. We are specifically identifying some sources of conflict. We had a very intriguing discussion last week, and we're back today to continue from where we left off. With me, Dr. Greene, is Dr. Braithwaite.
Good day, radio friends. Good day, viewing friends. Happy to be on with you today. And, the discussion for the last couple of weeks has just been great. I hope that you've been blessed by it, and I hope that you're encouraging other people to join. Send around the link, just let people know that we're on. And, I think that, during this discussion, that people are going to be just wowed in terms of understanding some of the dynamics, and I think it will make a difference, a positive difference in many relationships.
That's our hope, right?
Yeah.
Well, we invite you to pray with us at this time. Father, be with us, grant us your wisdom, your peace, as we discuss. Grant that the concepts presented will prove meaningful in mending broken marriages, in resolving conflicts, and in creating environments of peace and safety. This is our prayer in your precious name.
Amen. Amen.
Conflicts, sources of conflict.
Yes, yes.
We shared work, children, we spoke about outside influences, hobbies, we spoke about screen, television, internet, social media. Doc, today I want us to begin with in-laws.
In-laws. Wow.
In-laws. I mean, I have, in my experience as a counselor, as a marriage counselor, this has created a lot of conflict in marriages. I've seen marriages go apart. And when you get to the bottom of the issue, some spouse says, I felt that my in-law was the other person in this relationship. I felt that my in-law had priority over me.
Yes.
In this relationship. So I want to go back to Genesis,
Yes.
right? For this cause, shall a man leave father and mother and cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Take it from there, Doc.
Yeah, one flesh, that idea of coming away from, coming apart from, setting up your own home, setting up your own space, and operating in the context of your own customs and practices is so very important. And, the Bible is very clear that, you leave and you cleave, right?
But Doc, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine.
But I'm getting married, and I'm not very well established financially. And my father and mother said, listen, man, we have a nice apartment downstairs. We're going to furnish it for you. You can come and live with us. And, we'll take care of business. One of these days, you could save. We're not even going to charge you rent.
Yes,
we could save. And if you run out of food, you can always come up and
get some food, man.
So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, that's not leaving. that's not leaving, Doc. That is staying very close and operating in the context that can potentially do harm to your relationship. And so, in our discussion, as we look at in-laws, what we're talking about is not necessarily the physical closeness, but sometimes the unspoken influence, all right? The unspoken influence of your father or your mother living upstairs and you living downstairs. And, just observing how that influences the new relationship. You mentioned, if I run out of sugar, call upstairs, or you run upstairs, you still have a key. Mommy ran out of sugar, I'm just going to come and pick up some sugar here. Or vice versa. Mommy runs out of sugar and she comes downstairs to pick up some sugar. Your car isn't working. And rather than now learning how to rely on each other and to work through your own challenges independently of your parents, you begin to rely on them. It's not obvious, subtle, the influence. Your child, as that child grows and running upstairs to grandma, grandma becomes so influential in that child's life that may not even have the influence that you want to have over your own child. The dynamics are so broad, Doc, that we could spend we could spend sessions just talking about this.
On this, indeed, Doc. And
right.
I'm trying to resist the temptation here because, you know, I mean, there's so many elements that you mentioned there. How do I want my child to grow up? Now, I love my parents, but I may say, I don't think I want my children to grow up the way I grew up,
right.
you know.
Right.
And so, but in addition to that, I just a few weeks ago or a day ago, maybe I heard a gentleman speaking, you know, he was very passionate about something. And I'm not sure he understood what he was saying, but he said to me, he said, listen, I love my children, you know, but at my age, my grandchildren, these are the ones. You know, he said, my son is grown, so he could do what he wants. But you see that little girl he has there?
Yeah.
He says, I pamper her.
Yeah.
You know, and
everything she needs, yeah.
Sometimes she doesn't like what daddy does, you know. She can always find comfort and love with me. I mean, grandparents tend to spoil the children, the grandchildren.
Yes.
And so you want to have a certain degree of independence. Of course, you know, you're always grateful when you can have them babysit for a night or so, when you have to do it.
On your terms. On
your terms.
Yeah,
that's the point.
Yeah.
But you have to be careful. And there's so many dynamics.
No, I mean, I have to share. You know, imagine, Doc, you and your wife, you're working, you know, you're trying to furnish your house or whatever it is, you're doing your little bits and pieces and you're making ends meet. And, you know, the man, you know, men operate in that context, not always great, but of course a man and his spouse, as he wants to be the provider for his home, you know. You're planning to buy a TV, you're saving up your money, Pastor, you excited about this 37-inch flat screen TV that you're going to buy and all of that, and you exactly know where you're going to put it and so on, your wife and you working towards it, and then you get home one day and see a big 50-inch TV in your house, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, some people say, well, you should be grateful, but it deflates the man's ego that, you know, I didn't get a chance to provide that for my family. My father or my mother went ahead. They have means, they could do anything they want. They brought this and put it in my house. And they say, surprise, you know. I mean,
and you feel as though, I mean, am I really in charge here?
Right.
You know, that sense.
Yes.
And you mentioned it. You said influence, you know, that outside influence. For that matter, now we're using the example of, you know, living in the apartment below, but you could be living miles away for that matter.
That's right, yeah.
But, you know, if every time you have to make a decision, you have to call mommy and get her opinion on it
and her,
before you settle on it.
Yeah.
That can be dangerous.
Yeah, extremely. To the point where sometimes you don't even recognize it's happening, and that you are actually relegating your spouse to a place where they do not play that much, or they're not that involved in your life, because every choice that you make, you have to get approval from your parents. You know, and as you mentioned, you can be in the same space and that can happen. You could be miles away and that happens. You could be in another country and that happens.
Exactly.
Because every time a decision is there to be made, you call back to get approval. You know, couples have to learn to move away from that. You know, and to begin to address their own issues and their own matters as it relates to their family, because that's the only way the family is going to grow.
You know, I quoted Genesis, you know, for this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, be united with his wife. The concept there is that you are a separate unit.
Yes.
You should have a degree of independence. You are one. They're no longer twain, but one. And the oneness says that you are going to have shared responsibility. You're going to discuss. You're going to make decisions together.
Yes.
You're going to fight your battles together. You're going to journey together. And if you need to get assistance from an in-law with something, at least it should be a united decision. The concept of my in-law has to come and give the final word, or when I discuss something with my spouse, I have to go and get a second opinion from my in-law.
Exactly.
That erodes the whole fabric of what the marriage is.
That's right.
And so my spouse now begins to think that she's not so important anymore. You know, her word doesn't count, because it unless it lines up with what my in-laws say, then with what my parents say, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge.
So some people feel like if they don't consult with their parents or do what their parents say, they're not being respectful to their parents. They feel like, I have to give due and just respect to my parents because they were the ones who raised me. I mean, how do you respond? How can we respond to that in light of the fact that you mentioned, or the Bible says that you live and you cleave, that you establish your own place, your own space, your own cultures, your own customs, your own choices and decisions. You're establishing that, yet still one person has the mindset that if I don't discuss this with mommy and daddy, I've done something wrong.
Well, again, I want to go back to Genesis, because when you get to the point where you're ready to step out on your own and be your own boss, if you are not prepared to be independent, then don't get married.
Right.
Go back home and let your mother and your father parent you. But when you step out and you take a wife or a husband and you establish a separate unit, that becomes the home. That is the area of influence, the center of influence that you are going to now build and rear children. My parents had the responsibility to nurture me when I was growing up.
Yeah.
They had, some say 18 years, some say 16 years, some say 21 years, whatever, cultures vary. But they had that time to do their role. The parents should get to the point. I want to talk to parents now. You should get to the point where you realize you have done your responsibility.
Yes.
I'm going to use police, right? So we have, because I don't live very far from the police training school.
Okay.
So every now and then they have a batch of new recruits coming. They spend several months going through the drills. I hear them in the mornings when they're doing their drilling and they're marching and they're exercising and all those kinds of things. But there is going to come a graduation day. When that graduation day comes and they get out of there, that commander over there doesn't want them coming back there saying, I forget how to do this. You get your training and you go out.
That's right.
You have responsibility. You're out there now. You're an officer.
Yes.
And you do what you're supposed to do out there.
I've been trained to do.
So you have some time at home, right? And not that you're going to give up the connection, because the honoring and the respect that you have for your parents should always be there. But you have to understand that roles change.
Yes.
And now you become the figure in your home. You call the shots, not your parents. Right. They control their home. You control yours.
So what parents actually do is really, by raising the children, is you're preparing them to launch them.
Exactly.
Right? You're prepared to launch. So, when the boat is finished building, they launch it into the ocean. You go, you paddle, you get along, you keep going. Eagles, they mash up the nest.
Go back to the boat. I just want to make one point.
Yeah.
The boat is built on land.
Yes, right. Good point.
But when it's done, its place is in the water.
That's right. That's right.
And that's the concept. It's on the water that it is going to serve its useful purpose. And that's what you do. You launch.
Yep.
And you say goodbye.
Let them go, yeah.
And that's it.
I was using the example of the eagle who throws that eaglet out, spread your wings and fly, destroy the nest. You don't come back here.
That's
right.
right.
I'm saying this is you go and deal with your own business,
Yeah.
And that's what parents are really there to do. Our job is to help them to do well when they are launched, and that's not to say that they can't check back with you for something every now and again, but there should be no consistent walking together along that path as they establish their own family. You have to give them the chance now to do that for their children and for their family. And so, oftentimes we do so much more harm, as parents can do so much more harm by trying to, just trying to hold on to your children when you've already launched them.
And let me say this too, because, if you are a parent and you are encroaching on your children's presence, their independence, their ability to run their own home, you are destroying that marriage.
Yes, you
are. You
are
are creating undue stress for that couple.
Yeah.
Now, they may not tell you out of respect,
right,
but it does bother them. And
yeah.
you know, we can say a whole lot here, Doc.
Yeah.
As a parent, you should, once upon a time, you know, when I was a child growing up, the common thing in my community was that parents have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 children, plenty children. And my understanding is that they used to think that those children are their security for when they get old. So my children will take care of me when I get old. But I say to children, I say to parents today, plan your retirement well. Do not expect your children to take care of you when you get old.
Yep.
They are going to have
their own business,
their own responsibilities. They're going to have mortgage to pay. They're going to have their children to send to university. And if it is expensive to send people to school now, imagine what it is going to be when your children grow up. You know, so plan well. And if the children bring something or do, you know, appreciate it as a kind gesture, of course, but have your own plan. And while we are working, we should not just be working to sustain ourselves for the now. We should always consider that one of these days we are not going to be able to work.
That's right.
And so we have to plan for the rainy day. When the Bible says, go to the end, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Because what she does, she puts up for the rainy day. That rainy day is that period when we are not going to be active enough to work.
That's right.
And the government has Social Security or NIS or whatever terminology you use in your country. But you ought to be able to do something to augment that so that you can live in a meaningful way when you get old.
So, you know, as we look at this, we're looking at how in-laws can create a sort of an issue in context of conflict in a relationship. And we're saying that when in-laws are overly involved in the life of a new couple or a family, it can be problematic. You know, we are saying that, you know, in-laws, there needs to be boundaries. Doc, there need to be some boundaries, right? And this goes not just for in-laws, because some people have some very close friends who are like family, who can sometimes create that challenge, you know. You have friends who can show up at any time at your place, come in and walk in and go into your fridge, you know, and also have significant influence on the choices that are made in that family setting. And what we're saying is this can be problematic. You know, there need to be boundaries. People need to understand at what level they should be allowed to share or to influence your family.
I mean,
that's critical.
Let's say your spouse had a really close friend who was accustomed to visiting her house when she was growing up and going in the kitchen and opening the refrigerator and cooking and that kind of thing. You get married, you don't even know that. You get married, you know, and this friend comes to visit, and you just notice the friend goes in the kitchen and opens the fridge and takes out things and starts to cook, and you're wondering,
what's going on?
What's going on in my house? You know what I mean? So we need to be sensitive to how things.
I think, just to make a point here, because I think a lot of we have a lot of these sitcoms on television that most of these sitcoms create an environment of a family, but there's also there's a significant friend or family member who is very involved in that family life. And people watching it, it almost becomes like a norm or the thing to
it's
do.
What should happen.
Right. Yes. And so I think some people get confused in that arena where they're thinking this is probably a good way to operate your family. But, you know, it has some significant drawbacks. And the literature shows us that when people are, you know, when the boundaries are not solid, you have difficulties.
There's another area with this in-law thing that I want to talk about. Now in-law doesn't just refer to mother-in-law or father-in-law. It could be brother-in-law, sister-in-law.
Right.
So, as an example, Doc, I grew up in an environment. I'm using an example as you know, on after church, we gathered together as a family to have lunch. And so whether it be Saturday or Sunday, depending on when you worship, you go to your mother's home and you eat. And mother may even die and you continue the tradition and so on. And that's okay. That's okay. But now you get married and you don't discuss this with your spouse. You know, your spouse comes home on Friday when, you know, if you're Seventh Adventist, you're preparing, and he may notice that there's no preparation taking place here, and he's wondering what happened. Right. And you say, lunch is taken care of, don't worry, you know. And so after church you go, and all of the brothers and sisters and so on come, and you sit down and you eat. And you didn't so mind because this is the first time, but you know, you're looking forward to having your own local meal. But next week it happens again, and the next week it happens again. And you soon realize this is not just an occasional thing.
This is tradition.
This is it, right?
Yeah.
So again, premarital counseling will take care of that, because we talk about family tradition.
That's right.
But there's so many persons who do not get proper premarital counseling. You know, that can be a very serious challenge.
Making assumptions about traditions and how you will use holiday times and things like Sabbaths, or in some cases for those who are of different religious backgrounds, you know, those holy days, if you want to call it that. You can't assume that when you get married, it's going to be business as usual. You know, where do you spend Christmas? You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know, the husband may assume that we just go by my parents' house for Christmas, or you know, for the summer holidays, that, you know, once we're going to travel, we're going by this particular family member. We can't make those assumptions. Again, it creates conflict because the other person may have a desire for themselves. I am aware of couples who, very similar to the scenario raised, where, you know, when things were a little tough, one was saying, you know, I always had to go by a particular family to eat, and I never enjoyed doing that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I did it because that's what everybody expected me to do, but I was never happy doing that. You know, and so that's conflict right there. And if you don't learn to address it, it's a problem.
It is a problem.
It's a problem.
And that's the subtlety of this situation. That things can create challenges for your spouse, and initially your spouse may not even mention it because they don't want to ruffle waters. But over time, you know, the pressure builds, and then the conflict erupts. Yeah. And so we want you to be sensitive to that. Yep. So this in-law thing is a big thing.
Big thing.
Yeah,
but
we're just highlighting it as an area for now.
Yeah. Doc, I mean, I don't know if we have a whole lot more time. So if we want to move on to another area, or we just
yes, we can.
Okay. So we looked at in-laws. We could also take a quick look at. You can help me here.
Well, you know, I mean, we're going to leave the big ones for when we have time.
Right.
But, well, I don't know, because they're all big. but because we're talking about in-laws, let's talk about friends.
Yeah, I was hoping that we kind of touched it a bit.
Yeah, we kind of did touch it.
Yeah.
But now, when we have friends, Doc, you know, they're friends and they're friends. They're acquaintances and they're friends. Right. You may have a really, really close friend.
Yes.
You know, that is very meaningful to you. And your friend feels, based on the relationship you had before marriage, that they have access, total access. And now you're married. Marriage should say something to any and everybody. Right. You know, and I think it is important that when you're getting married, you know, because you hang out with your friends on the block, you know, the side of the road, you play dominoes until 2 o'clock in the morning. But now that you're married, you have other responsibilities. Yes. And there should be a difference in behavior. Yes. And your friends may be saying, well, what happened? You abandoned us? Well, you ought to be able to say to your friends, hey, listen, folks, I'm married. I have a wife at home. I have a husband that I need to attend to. Right. You know. Yeah, absolutely. And being able to have that conversation with your friends is important too. And not to the extent that necessarily they will feel like you've abandoned them. There will be a sense of a change in the nature of the relationship because you are married. And I don't think that that's a negative thing. I think that persons need to be able to appreciate that reality and grant the necessary space for the new relationship to grow.
there may be certain things, as you said, you know, you wouldn't expect that friend necessarily to come by your home and be jumping up and down, you know, all over the house, or, you know, laying on your bed. I mean, I know there, you know, people have that kind of friendship. And so I'm just making that point, you know, there are boundaries that need to be established and created in the context of very close friends that can allow the marriage itself to grow, so that there's no, you know, there are no necessary misunderstandings that can create problems for the marriage itself.
A group of single persons may decide to go on a trip, and as friends, you know, they hang out and they go on these hikes and trips and,
Yes.
and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And now you get married, and
Yes.
you say to your spouse, we're going on a trip.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Right.
But then your spouse discovers that
It's the whole posse.
it's a whole, you know.
It's the whole posse going, right.
Yeah, that can be a challenge.
Yeah, and that's what we talk about boundaries. I mean, there may be an appropriate time for that, you know, but it would have to be expressed, and there would have to be a discussion about whether they're comfortable with that or not.
Yes.
Because, you know, the spouse may be thinking, I just need time. We just need time as a couple to bond and to grow. You don't need this whole entourage, you know, coming along with us. So again, you know, friendships can have a similar negative impact as in-laws if it's not handled well. And what we're saying is that learning to manage your friendships is important. Not abandoning, because there are people in your life that you will always be grateful for, but not necessarily at the level that it used to happen previously.
Certainly, and it's good to have shared friends. It's good to have friends. You need associations.
Yes.
You can't, we like to say no man is an island, and,
Yes.
and that's really true. And if you don't have friends, people that you can interact with and sometimes hang out with, that is important.
Yes.
But we are talking about sources of conflict. And so the amount of time you give to your friends, the devotion you give to them, and how that is going to impact your relationship has to be considered likewise.
That's right.
These are very important areas, Doc. And we are saying that the things we are considering are not bad in themselves,
Right.
but there is the potential that if not handled properly, they can lead to some sources of conflict. Yes.
Correct.
And our time is up, just like that.
Just like that.
So friends, please feel free to join us next week. In fact, we invite you to join us next week. We ask that you tell a friend, share the link, and if you do have a question or concern, please write to us, marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. That email address again is marriageencounter@slcadventist.org. Until next week, same time, may God's richest blessings be yours.